Welcome everyone to another episode of the life of Charles Schmidt. Today we'll be talking about the family factor. Charles, welcome in today one more time to another episode of your story. In the previous episode, we talked about your beginnings and where you come from. Therefore, I'm sure that a lot of the audience out there wants to know what happens then. So this is a new episode where we will be continuing telling the story. And the question that I have for you, given though the name of this episode is called The Family Factor, tell me a little bit, Charles, do you have any kids?
Yes, I have two children, Valerie and Greg. Valerie was my firstborn. She was born in 1977, and my son was born a year later than my wife, Robin, and I. And those are the only two kids I have, and I have 4 grandchildren. My daughter has a son, Ryan, and a daughter, Jordan, and they live in Ashburn, Virginia, which is a suburb outside of Washington, D.C. My son lives in Boca Raton with his wife, Jessica, and they have 2 children. Mark is the oldest. I think he's about 12, 13. And Ethan is the younger, is about 2 years younger. And awesome. So I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren.
That's amazing how family can multiply in this case, right? Charles, tell me a little bit about how was Charles as a parent?
How was Charles at the time?
As a parent.
Well, I would say I was not a very good parent. I mean, I love being married. I love children, but I was an irresponsible parent. I was very social. I was a member of Coleridge Country Club in Fort Lauderdale. And every night after work, I would go over to the country club and play cards with the guys. And I would be home late for dinner. And sometimes I wouldn't come home at all. And I would say that I was not a good parent. And I drank too much. And my wife was getting tired of putting up with me. And so I remember one time I'm sitting on the couch in the living room and she says, "If you don't stop drinking, I'm going to divorce you."
Wow. That was a serious thing. So in a scale from 1 to 10, without putting yourself in a hole, how would you rate yourself as a parent? You just mentioned something that everybody does. I'm assuming it's hard to transition between being single and having a good social life versus being a parent, a provider for a family maybe. But, looking at this all sphere of being a dad, in other words, how would you rate yourself from 1 to 10?
I don't know. I think I'd rate myself 1 on certain aspects of it and 10 on the other. I'll tell you what I love to do. I love to work with my children, be the coach. I got divorced very early in the life of my children. My daughter was 8 and my son was 6. Now my daughter was highly motivated, very good student. And the way things work, after divorce, they get the father pays child support, and he gets to see the kids on the weekends or something like that. So I remember my daughter always had a project for me. She said, "I'm working on this paper for school, and I need you to help me with your computer and type it out for me." I said, "Valerie," I said, "please, I need to take a nap. And she would say, Dad, you can take a nap after we're gone. And she says, well, I need you to help me with this paper that I'm working on. I said, Valerie, let's do it some other time. But she was always highly motivated. And so in that respect, I tried to help her, but I wasn't enthusiastic. I wasn't as supportive as I should.
What about your son?
My son, I was crazy about him. I was actually crazy about both of them. I was very happy to have children, and I was happy to be married, and we had a nice house. I was right up the street from the country club, and my kids participated in tennis lessons, swimming meets. We would have Easter dinner there with the family. I really enjoyed being married, except I didn't pay attention to my wife like I should have. And there was other families that my wife thought had a better lifestyle than we did. There was other people that had, better cars, made more money, had more vacations, better vacations. And I was tired of listening to her to complain about not having enough. And I called her a more chick. In other words, I think you always want more. In other words, whatever we have is not good enough. You always want more.
Let me ask you a question. How do you think money shaped your family dynamics? You already said that your wife got into this comparison point between her friend's marriage and your marriage. But how did it shape your family as a whole?
Well, the more she complained, the more I stayed away from home. So that meant I was not as good of a parent as I should have been. And also, in the last year of the marriage, I remember one Christmas, and the stock market would go up and down and up and down. So there would be some months and some years that I would do very, very well. And then there would be I didn't get paid a regular salary. In other words, in 1980, I took a job at Smith Barney, and it was astronomical what happened to me. It was a coincidence of events, but the first month I was there, I made, I think, $1,200. The second month I was there, I made like $3,000. The third month I was there, I made $9,000. And the fourth month I was there, I made $30,000.
Wow.
So it looked like, boy, I was on the road to huge success. And then it went downhill. Then a few months after that, I was making $1,000 a month, or 50.
Which $1,000 a month back then seems to be a lot of money.
No, that's not enough to cover a mortgage and cover kids in private school and kids, and a wife that, me.
Was kind of demanding.
Of course, I was always well dressed, and I would buy custom made clothes and expensive stuff. So I was a good spender. My business was dependent on socializing with my clients.
And your personality, of course. All right. So how do you think raising your kids with these kind of wealth challenges was like? Do you think there was kind of some type of entitlement versus gratitude of life in a way?
I know they say, that's a good question. That's a very good question, very probing question. The reaction between the two kids was different. The timing was different. My daughter was always highly motivated, and she had a mind like, when she went to college to find a husband or find a boyfriend or something, she wanted the boyfriend to come from a good, solid family. No divorces in the family, not like her or other families that she knew. She wanted a solid family. And she found a guy that came from a family that
Had no divorce?
had no divorces in the family.
Wow.
And they got married. As a matter of fact, she was working for IBM. She got a good job right out of college.
Wow.
Out of Villanova, she was a very good student, got a good job with IBM, and they paid for her living expenses at a very nice hotel in Washington, D.C. It was right out of college. And then she brought home a couple of guys. One guy she brought home, I forget what his name was, but I was not a good, serious father to her. I mean, I remember she brings a boyfriend home from college and wants to introduce me, and I want to know if he wants a beer at 9 o'clock in the morning, because I was going to have one.
Just so you continue with the social mentality, huh?
That's not very good, you know.
Yep.
It's not.
Well, you know, I think
she was embarrassed for me.
Well, I believe that there is a time for everything, and you were used to living your lifestyle back then. That on that type of scenario.
Beer at 9 o'clock in the morning, good idea.
I mean, listen, there is people out there that they don't believe on wearing a mask. They want to be upfront and show who they really are, right? And you might have been that way, even though it didn't look nice.
Well, that's very complimentary, but I think it's a weakness. I think it's a character weakness. But anyway, then she got another boyfriend. He came. I think she might have kept him away from me. You know, and she actually hired this guy.
She learned to learn from the first lesson, in other words.
I think so.
Okay.
And I remember going to her wedding. I didn't want her to, have a big wedding. I told her, and I had just had some money from my inheritance, and my mother died. And I said, I will give you $20,000 not to have a wedding, because take a trip, do something.
Mm-hmm.
She want to have this wedding.
It was her dream. It was her dream. It's every woman's dream to get married.
Well, that was her dream, and that's what she got, and it was beautiful, and it was up in Pennsylvania, and she had it at I think it was Hope Valley Country Club. And it was real nice. There was a couple of hundred people there. I think, I don't know. It looked like. But I mean, there was only 3 bottles of vodka there on the outside of this beautiful thing. And my sister grabbed a bottle of vodka. So that meant, and I don't think half of them drank, but and put underneath the chair, because my sister's alcoholic. My son was a bad alcoholic, and I was alcoholic. And so
your sister basically thought about the whole family with that bottle. She's like, there is not enough in here, so we better preserve.
Actually, Valerie's the only one in my family was not an alcoholic.
Wow. Based on everything that you have shared today, Charles, has there been any impact on your children, on your kids? Are there lessons that have learned from them and you? Are the lessons that have been learned you from them and them from you? What do you think the takeaways of being a dad for you has been?
Well, it's very rewarding in many respects. I wish I could have been closer to my children, but I understand. My wife, when she got a divorce, we lived in Fort Lauderdale, and she wanted to get the kids away from me. She thought I was a bad influence on my kids, which I was. And so she moved them back to her home in Philadelphia. And as I recall, I don't know whether it's a true story, but she told the kids that Philadelphia is a much better place than Florida, because in Florida, there's only 2 nice months of the year, January and February, and the rest of it's all real hot down there.
Yeah.
They were in Philadelphia. She was working up there, and kids, I would see the kids once in a while. I don't think I ever went up to see them. You know, it was kind of an estranged relationship. So I didn't have a chance to watch the kids grow up after she was 8 years, because they were away from me up in Philadelphia. And my daughter went to Villanova, which is a very good school up there, and graduated, as I said, went to work at IBM. My son took off after me.
Okay.
He was not a successful college student. He does not have a college degree. He, unfortunately, he had many of my bad traits. But he was, and in 2006, I went to see a doctor because I was not feeling well.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my alcoholism, I drank all the time, from the time I got up till the time I went to bed. And I was unhealthy, so I went in there. The new doctor, I think his name was Dr. Schmidt. And when I went in, I couldn't even fill out the form.
The intake form?
The patient form, you know, where
Mm-hmm.
I have to write down Charles Schmidt.
Mm-hmm.
I
You were shaking your hand and stuff?
Shaking, I got it there.
Mm-hmm.
So the doctor comes in, he says, "See, you're having a little trouble with your handwriting." I said, "Yeah, I always get nervous when I go see the doctor." He says, "Yeah, that's too bad." He says, "Okay, just a minute." And he walks out of the room for about 10, 15 minutes. And I'm an alcoholic. The drinking is bad. And I have a little igloo cooler in the trunk of my car. This is embarrassing to tell the story, but this is my life.
It's all about you, my friend.
This is my. So all I can think about is, when am I going to get out of here so I can get into my car with the ice and the vodka and have a drink. This is in the morning appointment. Come back 15 years later, he says, "Well, it doesn't. I can't really find much wrong with you, but how's your lifestyle?" I said, "Well, look, everything's fine. I'm good. I'm okay. Oh, I know what I needed. I needed life insurance, and I needed a doctor's opinion that said I was okay to get life insurance."
Okay.
So then he goes out of the room. He come back 15 minutes later, and I'm starting to get the shakes from my alcoholism. Then he come back in again 15 minutes later. So I've been there 45 minutes. This guy's talked to me for less than a minute each time. And he knows I'm getting all uptight,
Mm-hmm.
everything. And this happens one more time at the end of the hour. I said, "Look, Doc, I just came in to get approval on life insurance." And I said, I got an appointment. I have to get out of here. And he says, "That's fine." He says, and he closes up my file, and he says, I don't expect to see you again.
Wow.
You're not going to make it.
Wow.
And so that was my last drink for 11 years.
Wow.
No, wait a minute. No, excuse me. Wasn't my last drink. My son had the same problem as me. Totally irresponsible. In other words, he couldn't hold a job. He was living in a halfway house. I was subsidizing him out of my inheritance. This and that. He'd live in a halfway house. He had a girlfriend in a halfway house. He got kicked out of his halfway house for drinking. So he goes over to the girlfriend's halfway house, and I think she got kicked out of hers. But the two of them got together and quit drinking, and neither one of them have had a drink since they've been married, and it's about 15 years now.
Wow.
So,
that's a very strong determination. How is the relationship with the kids?
I'd say it's good. I'd say not great. I'd say it's very good compared to some families. And it's all relative. I would like to. I have money for businesses like your business. I want to see you be successful. I want to see these kids that I mentor at the Dreyfus School of the Arts successful. All these scholarship kids, I want to see successful. I would like to work with my son in some business.
Okay.
And he was very successful in his business at the Parts Base. That's this company here. It's an airplane parts subscription service. And he had like 100 some people working for him. He was the president of the company. But there was one guy that owned the company. And I said, Greg, you have no security in your job. If that guy gets mad at you one time or another, the business starts to get a little soft, or he doesn't like you, you're out of work. And so you need a piece of the action. Well, he never followed that advice, just kept going, making a good salary, providing for his family, and his wife was doing real well. And then one day he's not working there anymore. The guy got rid of him. And this was about 2 or 3 years ago. Now he has made a lot of money in the stock market, and his wife has made a lot of money, and they live very well.
That's great. That's great. So you told me you want to work with your son.
I want to help him.
Some kind of business.
I want to help him with some kind of business. I want to help him with my connections I strongly urged him to be a real estate salesman.
Okay.
Now, he was a real estate salesman after he did not well in college.
How do you see that relationship being like working with your son?
Well, it's a work in progress. He knows there's something missing. He's trying to make it better, and I'm trying to make it better.
That's great. What can you do better to get a better relationship with your family?
I have to be careful what I say.
Okay.
Now, some people don't like criticism. Like if I criticize you, or we do something in the lighting, or you don't sit up straight, or I don't sit up straight, or I cough in the middle of my talk or something like that. Some people can handle criticism better than others.
Correct.
And so one time I went to Palm Beach Atlantic, and I listened to this speaker whose family owned Chick-fil-A, the
Okay.
restaurant. Very successful guy. And the father wrote a book, a little tiny book about discipline for your children, and that they have to be a certain discipline, and they have to be very appreciative and be very grateful. And I was very impressed with this speaker, Dan Cathy. And so I want to share that with my son and his wife, because I think that his two kids are not disciplined. In other words, they've had everything in their life. They want to do, whatever they want to do. They go to private schools. They've been to the Super Bowl. They've been to skiing. They've been to Europe a couple of times. These are kids that are not yet teenagers yet, and they've done all this stuff. And I think they're both of them great athletes, but I think they're spoiled. And I don't think they have a concept of what it's like for hard times. They live in a elegant house. So I decide that I'm going to go down there and lecture them and tell them how to run their life.
Okay.
Big mistake. In other words, I took this book down and I said, now this and that. And I said, look, I want to have a conversation with all of you, the family of, this book says such and such and so on and so forth. And the kids are playing with their telephone, and the other ones got up. They could care less of what I had to say. They're sitting right. I said, look. I said, you're not paying any attention at all. There's no use you sitting here. Go someplace else. And so they leave. They're happy to get away from me. They don't want me telling them what to do. Now, the wife, Jessica, who I was very tight with, I told her afterwards, I said, I hope I wasn't too harsh. I hope you didn't take it the wrong way. I was just trying to be constructive and everything. She said, oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. Well, that was about 2 years ago, and she's been very cool to me for the last 2 years.
Okay.
In other words, she doesn't like me. I was critical of her children and the way that they were being brought up. And so this is, a lot of families go through this, but when the communication cuts off, in other words, the kids didn't want to hear from me, and the mother didn't want to hear from me. So,
You were the extra. This happens a lot of the times primarily because there is not any specific guide to parenting. Your son might have tried to be a better parent than you were, even though it looks wrong before your eyes. Jessica might be a better mom than her mom, but it's the best that they can do on their beliefs, right? And unfortunately, there's not a guide to be the perfect or the ideal parent. I agree with you. There's a lot of skepticism about parenting. There's a lot of families that are teared down because criticism happens among parenting, and especially in the world that we live in right now, right? Everything is different. Everything is different with technology, with AI, with the accessibility of things. The struggle that you faced growing up are different struggles that kids face nowadays. The struggles that I live were different struggles than you experience. And to close with this video today, what advice can you give to parents out there that might be living the social lifestyle, that might be partying every weekend, every day, that are being dominated by alcohol at this point, and also that are not realizing that they're about to lose everything or the most valuable thing that they have in life. What can you tell these people?
I couldn't have said it better. You know, to just be aware. In other words, be aware how actions can adversely affect, somebody, and be totally conscious of somebody else's feelings.
Well, everyone, the message from Charles today is basically one, be aware. Be aware of how you're doing. Be aware of who is near you and how you're dealing and treating those people near you. Be empathetic with other people. I think that it's a great skill to manage. It's a great skill to have. And then also, I think for my own advice, think about how success is actually measured. A lot of the times, it's not all about the money. It's not all about the love. It's not all about the family. So I think it's a matter of finding the balance between all of those topics and be happy in life.
I want to thank you, Henry, for the very probing questions that you have, and hopefully that these videos will have a positive impact on somebody.
That is the goal, Charles, to share your experiences. Everyone, thank you for staying tuned. We will see you on the next video.